Every flight begins and ends here. A strip of asphalt scorched by jet engines and marred with rubber. But not all runways are created equal. One of the world's most notorious is runway 35L at Congonhas Airport in Brazil.
It could surprise you at any moment.
In July 2007, TAM Airlines Flight 3054 becomes its latest victim.
Accelerate. Accelerate. It can. It can.
The runway claims 199 lives. It would be carefully scrutinized, its history reviewed. Investigators desperately need to know why runway 35L is so dangerous
35L, 35.
before more lives are lost.
Mayday, mayday.
Heavy rains pound Brazil's largest city. Sao Paulo sees this kind of deluge regularly during the winter rains. The downpour snarls traffic to and from Congonhas Airport. 800 kilometers away, TAM Airlines Flight 3054 is en route from the southern Brazilian city of Porto Alegre. The Airbus A320 is headed for Sao Paulo 90 minutes away. For the 181 passengers on board, it's a routine domestic flight. But there's been an unexpected development for Captain Henrique Stefanini di Sacco. He and his first officer, Kleiber Lima, have just learned that the heavy rain has temporarily shut down runway 35L, the main runway at their destination.
Did they say when it would reopen?
No.
Let's prepare an alternate just in case.
Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like due to the weather, we may not be able to land at Congonhas as planned.
I will keep you advised as I get more information.
Congonhas Airport is one of the busiest in the world. Planes take off and land here every 90 seconds, carrying a steady stream of people and cargo into the country's economic hub. But Congonhas is also notorious among pilots. The airport lies in the heart of the city, crowded on all sides by apartment buildings, offices, and roadways. Runway 35L is less than 2,000 meters long, short for large jets. Even worse, it's built on a hilltop with a sharp drop-off on all sides.
The risk the airport poses, due to its construction, due to its geography, it does not allow for simple mistakes.
Captain Carlos Camacho is the flight safety director of the Brazilian Pilots Union.
As you approach the runway, your adrenaline is really pumping. For us pilots, it's like landing on an aircraft carrier.
It makes Congonhas one of the most treacherous airports in the world. In fact, a Pantanal Airlines commuter plane spun out of control while landing just the day before. And a few months ago, disaster was narrowly averted when a Boeing 737 came skidding to a stop, just inches before the steep embankment at the end of runway 35L.
When pilots begin landing at Congonhas, they're more worried than when operating at any other national airport.
Flight 3054 is at cruising altitude south of Sao Paulo when the crew gets news that runway 35L is back in operation.
3054, 35L is the active runway.
There's no need to divert.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I have some good news for you. The runway at
Congonhas has reopened. We'll arrive as scheduled shortly before 7 p.m.
The relief of the passengers is not shared by the pilot. Stefanini has an additional challenge on this flight.
Remember, we only have one reverse, sir.
Yes. Only the left.
He will have to land at one of the world's most challenging airports, with less than the usual amount of stopping power. One of the Airbus's 2 thrust reversers isn't working. The devices are designed to slow the aircraft on landing by reversing engine thrust.
If I was the pilot that day, I would be extremely concerned knowing that one of my reversers wasn't functioning.
10-3054, 35L, clear to land.
Stefanini will be landing on the infamous runway 35L.
The runway is wet and it's slippery. The wind is 330 at 8 knots.
The crew was informed of poor braking conditions on the runway.
The Airbus is on final approach. Even though the autopilot could get the plane to the runway, the captain decides to take over the controls himself.
Land green, manual flight.
He wants to bring the plane in as close to the runway threshold as possible. He needs every inch of runway he can get.
35L, 35L.
The concern was that after touching down, the pilots needed to be sure that they would be able to stop their plane before the end of the runway.
The passengers only know that they'll soon be landing. Now they are only 300 feet above the city. The Airbus is lined up with the center of the runway.
Middle.
They're one-way conditions.
200, 200. 100, 100.
1 dot now. Okay.
The plane's wheels will touch the Congonhas tarmac in seconds.
20. Retard.
As the plane touches down, their worries about landing are only just beginning.
Captain Stefanini applies reverse thrust to the A320's only working reverser.
The pilot would have to activate the reverser on the engine that had a working reverser as fast as possible to initiate deceleration.
But the plane is not slowing down.
Reverse number 1 only.
At this rate, it will use up the entire 1,945 meters of runway in less than 30 seconds.
Decelerate.
It can't!
The pilots operated the foot brakes with the pedals, pressing on them for a long time.
Look at this.
Now,
Look at this.
the aircraft mysteriously pulls to the left.
Turn! Turn!
It's almost as if it has a mind of its own.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Flight 3054 has slammed into a TAM Airlines building and an adjacent gas station. Nearly 200 firefighters descend on the scene. They face a raging fuel fire, burning at almost 1,000 degrees Celsius. The devastation horrifies Dr. Douglas Ferrari.
Essa explosão, ela espalhou fogo na
The explosion spread fire throughout the entire area. There was a fire in the gas station, killing the people who were filling up their tanks, burning the whole structure, turning it unrecognizable.
Toda a estrutura do posto irreconhecível.
He had hoped to treat survivors, but now he fears there might not be any.
Nós tínhamos 3, 4
We had 4 cars on fire. In one of these cars, I saw a mother with her child,
vi uma mãe com
dead.
uma criança morta.
The entire plane is engulfed in flames. There's little hope for anyone inside. But now there is a new danger. Huge quantities of fuel in the storage tanks beneath the gas station could blow up at any moment.
Quando o avião bateu, ele
The aircraft broke its wings on impact
jogou combustível
and spilled fuel throughout the entire area.
região, o local. E havia risco naquele momento.
There was a risk of the gas station exploding.
Posto de gasolina.
Rescuers hope they can save people in the TAM Airlines building. But with the fire raging out of control, they will have to act fast.
Então a gente conseguia retirar.
We tried to rescue the people from inside the building.
Estava naquela adrenalina.
I was anxious to help them.
De atender as pessoas.
Dr. Ferrari makes a grim find inside the TAM Airlines offices.
A asa do avião.
The airplane wing blocked the way. It prevented people from escaping.
Ela não permitiu a sair do avião, não permitiu a sair.
I was behind the firefighter accompanying me
O bombeiro estava comigo.
while he moved bodies to the sidewalk.
Foi retirando os corpos e colocando na calçada.
It was a horrible feeling.
Era muito ruim.
But they do locate some office workers in another part of the building and rush them to safety.
On the right side of the building, where there was no obstruction, there was time for people to get out. About 10 or 20 people made it.
No one in the aircraft has survived. 199 people are dead, including a dozen people in the gas station and the TAM building. It's the worst aviation accident in South American history.
The black boxes will not last long in the heat!
Lieutenant Colonel Fernando Camargo is an accident investigator with CENIPA, the country's aviation safety agency.
In modern aircraft, the recorders are the core of any investigation. So when we arrived at the crash site and we saw that strong fire, we got really concerned about the integrity of the data.
He knows the intense heat could already be damaging the plane's data and voice recorders. Valuable evidence that could help explain the crash may already be lost. Colonel Camargo and his team know that just the day before, another plane slid off runway 35L.
We knew that we would have to run a complete investigation on the runway.
If a rain-slicked runway caused this crash, disaster could strike again soon. The pressure is on to figure out exactly what happened to Flight 3054.
I knew that there was a video from the surveillance system.
That's the time of the accident. That must be it.
The airport surveillance system captured the doomed Airbus speeding down the runway.
This video could solve a lot of issues.
Let's see it again, please.
But the crash was outside the range of the cameras.
Can we look at this from a different angle?
Even without the crash on tape, the video could hold important clues.
Do you have tape of other A320s landing? Okay, go ahead and play it now.
We compared these time frames from one aircraft to another.
Nine seconds.
A regular landing, the aircraft would take something about 9 seconds to pass over this camera.
Okay, now the crash plane, please.
And the accident aircraft took 3 seconds.
3 seconds?
That puzzled us a little bit.
Why was the crash plane going 3 times faster than the regular A320 landing?
Four hours after the accident, firefighters are still battling the intense blaze.
The fire was a strong fire with a lot of fuel to keep it burning.
Camargo is desperate to gain access to the tail section, which contains the 2 black boxes.
They concentrated the fight in the rear of the aircraft.
Finally, firefighters beat back the flames enough to get at the recorders. But it may be too late.
They can be submitted to fire till a certain temperature. After that, there's no guarantee that data will be preserved.
The recorders will be sent to Washington to be examined at the National Transportation Safety Board. Now, investigators can focus on the infamous runway 35L. They examine the surface for clues that might explain why Flight 3054 went so badly out of control.
We walked through the runway, searching for evidence, marks of the aircraft, the point where it veered off the runway.
It's still wet!
The water is pooling, creating puddles. That shouldn't happen on a modern runway.
When this water gets in contact with the landing gear, the tires, it can generate what we call hydroplaning. And this is a problem because a pilot will have little or no control of his aircraft.
Camargo and his team wonder why water is pooling on the runway. They study files from the government agency that runs Congonhas Airport. They learned that runway 35L had been completely resurfaced just 1 month before the accident.
In 2007, the runway at Congonhas underwent repairs. It had been offering a very low level of traction. There were many reports of skids.
For years, pilots had been complaining about the slippery conditions.
They knew that the pavement need to be reconstructed because the surface allowed the water to accumulate.
35L, 35L.
The runway had been resurfaced. That should have solved the water problem. It reopened just weeks before the crash. The new surface seemed to be a major improvement.
The airport operated for about a month in dry weather with no problems.
But then, 3 days before the crash, heavy rains began.
And with the rain, all the problems that were supposed to be solved came back.
On the night of the accident, the biggest problem was still the water. Aircraft were still reporting difficulties braking.
Runway is wet and it's slippery.
In theory, there was no more depressions on the runway to accumulate water. So what could cause water to accumulate?
He discovers that the repair work lacked a critical safety feature.
Grooving to be done at a later date. No wonder it was wet.
Special grooves that carry away rainwater. Without them, rain would collect in puddles.
The repairs still lacked the necessary upgrade. It was very difficult to interrupt the operation of the main runway in order to install the grooves.
Evidence is mounting that a compromised surface on runway 35L played a key role in Brazil's worst airline accident. Colonel Camargo is concerned that Brazil's notorious rains may bring more runway disasters.
Soon after the accident, we recommended the suspension of the operations of regular aircraft in rainy conditions.
The airport authority complies, shutting down runway 35L until answers are found. But the main runway at one of the world's busiest airports can't stay closed for long. They must find out what caused this accident as soon as possible. Their focus turns to the A320's thrust reversers. The plane's maintenance records reveal why only one of them was working. 4 days before the crash, mechanics deactivated the right engine's thrust reverser for routine maintenance.
Check A3 found.
But the aircraft had then flown without incident for 4 days.
Action required.
Not only had the plane landed repeatedly with one thrust reverser, it had even landed safely on runway 35L.
This plane landed on the same runway. On the same runway that day with the same problems. Had only one thrust reverser. Just one thrust reverser. No issues whatsoever.
So why had this landing gone so wrong? Colonel Fernando Camargo travels to Washington, D.C. Technicians at the National Transportation Safety Board will help him try to recover data stored in Flight 3054's badly burned flight recorders. First, they look for a temperature-sensitive chip that could provide a clue as to how bad the heat damage might be.
There's an indicator that turns the color if it was exposed to a temperature above that one that it was manufactured to support.
Even though the boxes are designed to survive a fierce fire of up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, the chip's appearance is worrying news.
These boards were submitted to a fire that exceeded its limitation.
They test the circuit board to see if any of the memory survived. Without the data, the investigation into Flight 3054 would be effectively crippled. Colonel Camargo may never know why 199 people died at Brazil's busiest airport. But the circuit board test provides some hope.
Okay, we got something.
Fortunately, everything works okay. We could recover 100% of the data.
Here we go.
The information paints a picture of the plane's performance.
The speed is fine.
In the critical seconds before the crash.
It came down fine. Brakes were engaged. The brakes were engaged.
The data confirms that the foot brakes were working properly and that the A320 did not skid or slide.
Here.
Then Camargo discovers that the plane's two engines were inexplicably operating against each other.
Engine 1.
The plane's left engine was in reverse to help slow the aircraft down. But the right engine, the one with a disabled thrust reverser,
it's powering up.
Was doing the opposite.
For takeoff. It's supposed to be idling.
Instead of winding down, it was accelerating to climb power.
Decelerate. It can. Decelerate. It can.
With one engine at full power, the pilots didn't have a chance to stop their aircraft in time.
This aircraft was braking.
Oh my God! Yes, look at this.
But it would take around 1 more kilometer for it to stop.
The lopsided thrust pushed the plane to the left.
The right engine really was increasing thrust. There was no means available for the pilot to avoid the aircraft to veer off to the left.
Could be this.
So engine 2 was thrusting when it should have been idling. That would explain the veer off to the left, right? So what does this mean?
Now Colonel Camargo needs to figure out why the right engine was at full power when it should have been in reverse.
At that time, we could establish roughly 2 main lines of investigation. One, mechanical failure. And the other one, pilot error.
Colonel Camargo brings in human factors investigators Lieutenant Colonel Marcia Farja and First Lieutenant Vanessa Diaz.
Pilot is Enrique Stefanini Di Sacco, age 53, from Sao Paulo, 13,654 flight hours.
The pilot, who was in command, was a very experienced pilot. He knew the aircraft very well.
His first officer was Aguiar Kleber Lima, age 54, from Puerto Velo, 14,760 flight hours.
He had enough training to do a good job, including in an emergency situation.
Their job is to determine if the crew somehow made an error that could have caused one engine to stay at full power.
Machines are straightforward because they work in predictable ways. Humans are infinitely more complex in the way they think and act. It's much harder to analyze their behavior in an accident.
Desafio nosso a mais a entender.
But I can't believe that this pilot would make that kind of mistake. Okay.
The human factors team must now conduct a psychological study of the crew to understand how they might have committed a fatal misstep.
A gente tenta recriar através da história da pessoa.
We attempted to reconstruct the individual history of each crew member and their experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I have some good news for you.
And tried to create a picture that could help us explain what happened in the cockpit.
Passou dentro da cabine.
Colonel Camargo still believes a mechanical failure is more likely. He now turns his attention to the complicated mechanics that link the thrust levers to the engines. He must determine if a failure there led to the mysterious power surge.
We began studying this thrust system, each and every component of the system, from the lever to the engine.
We've been through it. We know it's not the FADEC.
There's nothing wrong with the engines. That leaves only one component that could have caused the problem. The mechanism that links the throttles to the engines, a device called an artificial feel unit, or AFU. Investigators wonder if that device failed, leaving the engines at full power even though the pilots set the lever to idle. But such a failure is highly unlikely.
It's really a remote possibility. 400 billion hours of flight for us to have one occurrence of that.
Still, he needs to rule out the AFU as a possible cause of the crash. But he's not sure the unit can even be found amongst the wreckage.
Computers, all the avionics, everything was gone.
Luckily, one of the few pieces to have survived the fire is the piece investigators now need, the AFU. It's sent to a specialized laboratory that can scan the metal for microscopic markings.
Well, look.
It got melted in such a way that you can work with it, so we could check something.
The 3D scanner allows them to look for nicks or scratches that would indicate the unit failed.
I'm looking for any unusual marks in this area.
If we could find out any mark, any evidence of the position of this gear, we could go after the lever and find out the real position of the thrust lever.
But they can find no evidence that the AFU malfunctioned.
Okay, pack it up, let's go home.
We found nothing. No mark, no evidence.
Colonel Camargo concludes mechanical failure was not to blame for the improper power setting on the right engine. He has to assume that for some reason, the crew left the right engine lever at full power after the Airbus landed. Back in Sao Paulo, the Human Factors team turns to the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR.
I have some good news for you. The runway at Congonhas.
They need to understand the pilot's state of mind as they approach Sao Paulo the night of the crash.
The CVR enables us to get an idea of the interaction between crew members.
They learned that Captain Stefanini was quite concerned about the runway conditions.
Ask him about the rain. The runway conditions. Is the runway slippery?
10 on final approach. 2 miles away. Could you confirm conditions?
It's wet and it's slippery, 3054.
Wet and slippery.
The pilot is already tense, and then he finds out that runway conditions are worse than usual, slippery and rainy. The tension can affect the pilot's perception, his concentration.
35 out, 35 out.
It now appears that Stefanini's anxiety about 35L, and not the runway itself, was the main cause of this crash. Camargo now focuses on the crew's actions.
I think it's ready, sir.
Thank you.
He needs to understand how the power levers were handled before the crash. Using data from the flight recorder, investigators focus first on the landing just prior to the one at Congonhas.
We discovered that the same pilot, the captain, was the one operating the aircraft in the previous land and in Congonhas.
First, how did they land in Porto Alegre?
Okay. Both levers full forward during approach.
They learned that during the previous landing in Porto Alegre, Captain Stefanini pulled back both thrust levers. Exactly the right procedure for landing with only one reverser.
And now, both levers to reverse.
At the time of the accident, the correct procedure was for the pilot to take both throttles to idle and both throttles to reverse, as if you had no problem with the reversers.
They've established that Captain Stefanini carried out the correct procedure for landing with one thrust reverser on the day of the crash.
No reverser number 2. Auto brakes on, and speed is dropping.
It puzzled me because of the fact that a captain knew the procedure. He performed the correct procedure hours before in the previous landing.
So what did he do differently 2.5 hours later in Sao Paulo?
Okay.
Okay, now Congonhas.
Left lever to idle.
The data shows that Captain Stefanini's handling of the thrust levers
Then reverse.
was very different on his landing in Sao Paulo.
20.
Instead of throttling back both levers, he only put the left engine in idle, leaving the right one at full power. Then, once the aircraft had touched down, he activated only the left reverser, again leaving the right engine at full.
That is quite different. I don't get it.
How could a guy that knew the aircraft, that knew the correct procedure, that executed a correct procedure, how could he do something different?
It doesn't seem to make sense.
We could really use your help on this.
Until Camargo enlists the help of another pilot. It's only then that he discovers an important detail that could explain what the captain did. It turns out there was an older, outdated procedure for landing an A320 with a single thrust reverser.
Could you demonstrate it for me, please?
It starts out the same, but then there's an important difference.
The former procedure was taking both levers to idle, and then just the lever corresponding to the engine with the reverser operating normally, that would be taken to reverse position.
But that is not what Captain Stefanini did. He left the right engine at full power instead of bringing it to idle. If he was attempting the old procedure, he got it wrong. Investigators learn that Captain Stefanini would not have been the first pilot to make that mistake. There had been several accidents around the world. The cause was identical. Pilots mishandling the procedure for landing with a disabled reverser, inadvertently leaving one thrust lever at full power.
That old procedure led pilots to error.
Airbus finally modified the procedure to reduce the risk of precisely that error.
The manufacturer changed the procedure and determined that both levers would come down together to the idle position, and then, right after touching the ground, both would come down to the reverser position.
Captain Stefanini was familiar with both the old and the new procedure for landing with a disabled reverser. It now seems on Flight 3054 he may have tried to use the old one. The question for investigators is why? Investigators still can't understand why the crew of Flight 3054 left an engine at full power after touching down.
Did they get it wrong?
But after interviewing other pilots, they do understand why using the older procedure would have made sense that rainy day at Congonhas. It would bring the plane to a stop much more quickly than the new one.
That could explain why the captain would go for the former procedure that he knew that was more efficient than the current one.
Investigators theorize that in reaction to deteriorating conditions at Congonhas,
Wet runway, one reverser. I'm going to buy us some runway and use the old procedure.
he was trying to ensure that he'd have as much distance as possible to stop on the notorious runway 35L. But he made a costly error.
Under those circumstances...
Remember, we only have one reverser. We have one reverser, manual flight, wet, slippery. One reverser, manual flight.
It is completely understandable that he had tried a former procedure and under such a pressure made a mistake.
Lieutenant Vanessa Diaz recreates the final moments of the flight in a simulator.
Okay, engine 1 to idle, engine 2 stays at climb.
She notices that in a dark cockpit, it would have been difficult to see the position of the thrust levers.
20. Retard.
Engine 1 to reverse, don't touch number 2. Brakes.
Okay, so... Wow. No simulador, nós temos como programar todas.
In the simulator, we were able to program in every known factor.
Nublado, chovendo.
The chronology of events, whether it was cloudy or raining, the wet surface, the slippery surface, position of the levers.
Dos manetes estarem na posição.
We also went off the runway and had an accident in the simulator.
E tivemos acidente no simulador.
Lieutenant Diaz believes she now understands why TAM Airlines Flight 3054 ended in tragedy. Captain Stefanini had done everything he could to ensure the A320 would touch down on runway 35L with as much room ahead of him as possible.
Land green, manual flight.
But the prospect of landing on the treacherous runway had so unnerved him that he bungled a simple procedure.
It's possible that tension might block a crucial motor response. It can affect the pilot's ability to react.
There was no alarm to warn them that one engine was speeding up while the other was in reverse. First Officer Lima tried to figure out what was going wrong.
Decelerate.
But in a dark cockpit,
It can't.
overwhelmed by a landing going badly, he didn't notice the abnormal thrust lever settings.
Decelerate. Decelerate.
Pilots were unable to understand what was happening to their aircraft.
Conseguindo perceber o que estava acontecendo na aeronave.
Look at this.
A runway with a dangerous reputation so unnerved a crew that they made a mistake that ended up killing 199 people.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Go!
Since the crash of Flight 3054, the runways at Congonhas have been grooved and are regularly inspected. New rules are in place dictating wet weather landing procedures.
In rainy weather, you need to have all of your reversers operating.
But despite these efforts to improve safety at Congonhas, many pilots doubt it's any better.
Congonhas is not safer today. It continues to be a dangerous airport. Only a total ban on operations in wet or rainy conditions would improve the safety of this airport.
What's clear is that even today, 35L is a runway that cannot shake its deadly reputation.
35L, 35L.